is the key to Earth's survival on the planet Saturn. Ooh, oh, I gotta read this. Well, the Golden Stallion here with you for your Wednesday Sovereign Tech Patreon only Q&A, and woo, I just got this in. Actually, it was on sale. I forget what exactly. I was looking through something. You know, it might have been an old scan of a comic book, and in it had this ad from another comic book company of all things. Or you know what? I think I was reading an old issue of the Phantom, because I know this company has like the rights to all of the Phantom comics, and they even make new ones. I'm a huge fan of the Phantom. You know, from Defenders of the Earth, and of course, you know, from comics and Years of Yore and all this stuff. You know, the ghost that walks, right? Anyway, and in there was an ad for Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, The Western Publishing Years, Volume 1. And I said, well, holy shit, what is that? I got to have that. Obviously, I went to the torrents to find it first, but as the torrent community has been so disappointing over the past couple of years, I couldn't find it. And so what did I do? Well, I went to HermesPress.com, which is, they're not a sponsor, but that's the company that was putting it out there. And lo and behold, they had it on sale. Normally it's like $30. It's this deluxe hardcover edition with a bunch of issues of the 1980s, you know, Gil Gerard and Aaron Gray and all that, the 1980s Buck Rogers tie-in comics to the television show. And they had it for like $15, and it is a absolutely gorgeous set. In fact, I'm going to put it back on the shelf here at the BDSM studio. I mean, it is stunning. I might end up getting that. I'm tempted to get that scanned, to get that professionally scanned, but at the same time, I really want to keep like a hardcover copy, because it's so, you know, I look up on my shelf, and I see my Mini-Mates. If you don't know about Mini-Mates, I have a few different sets of Mini-Mates up here. I have, let's see, there's Forbidden Planet, which has Robbie the Robot, of course. Then there's Lost in Space with B9 and Dr. Smith, you know, from the real Lost in Space, the original series. And then next to that is an entire, like, 6-figure deluxe set of Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, as Princess Ardala, Tiger Man, you know, Twiki and Buck, and of course Colonel Wilma Deering. Which, wow, you know, imagine that in 1980, that you had like a woman that was a colonel that was in charge of shit. Fucking right. Well, I know the 80s were, you know, we were coming out of the 70s, women empowerment and all that different shit, but it was still kind of rare, especially for like, you know, a science fiction, what I think most people might have considered a kid show, even though it really wasn't a kid show. Anyway, it's so hard to find Buck Rogers memorabilia of any kind, you know, even like the toys from way back or the models or something like that. I mean, it's a real pain in the ass. I also have a patch for the Earth Defense Directorate that I've yet to, and I've had that for over a decade. I've yet to find the perfect jacket for that to go on, and right now, honestly, like I'm not boasting, I'm having a hard time fitting into jackets to where I'm not gonna trust putting it on one when I might have to cut the sleeves off. But anyway, that again, really not boasting. Anyway, I might get that scanned. Just something I want to let you know. So I have been, and again, this is not a Patreon perk. It is being posted on Patreon, but being hosted by Mediafire, who Mediafire, I think, has probably the best legal teams in all of tech, because so much shit gets put on Mediafire that. Anyway, so I haven't put it up on torrents, okay, because I don't have, well, I'm not going to talk about that right now, but anyway, let's just say I don't have a setup at the moment, but regardless, I've been putting up on Mediafire a lot of these books rare books that you can't find on the torrent sites anywhere, or that aren't available to even buy digitally, you know, as an ebook or something like that, or a PDF or something like that. I've been, hosting them on Mediafire, and I've been making little posts and releasing a couple books at a time here and there on sovereigntech.com, which is the Patreon page. Now, again, they're public posts, so anybody can see them, okay? And so they're not Patreon perks. And also, the files themselves are not being hosted on Patreon. The links are there for Mediafire. Now, despite any, you know, Bear Brown situation, right, for, you know, the dangers of sharing, just sharing a link, I'm putting these up there, and people seem to be enjoying them. The download numbers are pretty nice. Feel free to share these around. In fact, I even created a custom URL It's books.zog.ninja. Okay, books.zog.ninja. And what that'll do is it takes you to the tab on Patreon where all of the posts that I make that have the links to these books get listed off. Okay, and so I figured that would make things easy, and I will mention it on the Sovereign Tech Prime episode this week. But I am getting a real joy, and apparently a lot of you are as well. I'm getting a real joy out of sharing. This is something that. But here, let me bottom line it. I wanted someone else to do this, but no one else would or could, or I don't know, whatever. They didn't have the wherewithal or the means or whatever whatever it is to make this happen. So I made it happen. It's one of my contributions to the world of freed information, I should say, not free, but freed information. Like last week, I think I released the Naval Press Institute edition, or Naval Institute Press edition, whatever, of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is probably the best translation with full notes and everything of that tremendous, and it is an anarchist piece of work. And that book alone will sell for a few $100, even though, it's been out of print since the 90s. There's no reason it should sell for a few $100. Yeah, I understand scarcity, rarity, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, I get that. But, what the fuck? Why can't that be out there available for everybody to read it? And so I made it so. And there you go. You can have fun with it. And there was some other stuff. I put out Tomorrow's Eve, which is a classic work of android fiction from the 19th century, if you'd believe it, out of France. Boy, those French, always thinking ahead. Anyway, so do check that out, books.sovereigntech.com, if you weren't aware of them. Because as many patrons as I have, and as much, and the metrics for Patreon, I can't exactly, I can't tell everything by them. It appears that episodes get downloaded pretty frequently and get listened to. However, there's not a ton of interaction on Patreon itself, to send me kind of the signals of what you're digging and what you're not. You send in your questions, which we're going to cover here in a second, and those, that lets me know which way you want to kind of steer the ship. But otherwise, I don't know. And so anyway, it's helpful, when there's interaction on Patreon to know if you appreciate that or, other things. Anyway, I'm going to release more of these books over time. I don't know that I will release all of the ones that I have been getting done, as it were. But, yeah. Anyway, let's move on to some questions. But I just wanted to share that I'm really enjoying sharing these with you. And, MediaFire works. I haven't, so the RetroShare community with Sovereign Tech, I haven't logged into that for a little while. I have just been so insanely busy working on other stuff. A lot of these things, and I know someone else was very kind to set up a Sovereign Tech Discord channel, I think. I'm kind of to the point, those kinds of projects, I can't take the time to work on those and, or maybe even necessarily so much engage with them. And I'm honored that people do that. And believe me, and I'm glad that you do. And I want these things to exist. If people want to make independent Sovereign Tech groups on whatever platform they want to do or whatever, please, I think it's so great that you're doing that, because Sovereign Tech listeners are every individual is unique, but you really are unique individuals if you're putting up with my shit. We might get into that later with one of the questions, but it's just, you're amazing. Okay, so you deserve a space where you can all kind of talk together, because I know you come from differing backgrounds, even differing ideas in a lot of ways, and so, have at each other and enjoy each other's presence. I think that that's a beautiful thing. The only thing I can really concentrate on is IRC, and, I'll talk about that more later if we can get to all these questions. So let's start getting to the questions. Okay, let's open it up. Here's a good one. Okay. And I shortened this, actually. So, until we have better established decentralized exchanges, what do we use? And the question was pretty much saying, because I had talked about, recently we had talked about when Stephanie was on a couple episodes ago, we were discussing how, Circle, was they bought Poloniex, and there was a real problem, and the real solution was decentralized exchanges. So, yeah, and we're kind of, the jury's out on how well some of these decentralized exchanges work and how trusting, how much you can trust them, etc. So what do we use for now? Well, there is a solution to that that I'm actually a very big fan of. And that is Evercoin at evercoin.com. So they are not a sponsor. I'm actually tempted to reach out to them to be a sponsor of Sovereign Tech. So that might happen. And they pretty much work like Shapeshift. But they also have, there's the website. They also have apps for iOS and Android. One of the nice things, and one of the first ways that I'd heard about them, was that they were one of the few places that very early on were on board with Zencash. And so you can actually use Zencash to exchange into a variety of, Monero. There's even like Decred, Waves. I know Waves is getting kind of popular because it allows you to create your own coin. Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash is there if you're into that. Ethereum Classic, even Bitcoin Gold, etc. And whatever. They've got a pretty good selection. It might not be as big as what Shapeshift has, but I really like Evercoin, and I like Evercoin. Not that I necessarily have so much of a problem with Shapeshift, but I like Evercoin. It's run by a couple guys, actually, ex-Silicon Valley guys, Miko Matsumara, and I forget the other guy's name, but these are guys that already made it. Like they didn't need to do this for the money. Like Evercoin is not a scam. And they allow you to use it despite any legalese that they have to put on their site. You can you can make transactions and you can exchange currencies. Again, it's not an exchange that you store things on. It just works like Shapeshift where you instantly convert. You can do it pretty anonymously. It's a really, really slick setup. Very simple website. I'm a big fan, and I've been using it for some time now. So that's what I recommend using at this moment is something like Evercoin. Just to be able to if you need to shift out of different currencies and everything. And in fact, they make a great case. They have a pretty good blog that is interesting to read, and they make a pretty good case of why you don't want to leave money in exchanges. So they recognize that they're a solution for the problems that we have with centralized exchanges. So if you do want to be switching out your cryptos, and maybe investing in other alternative cryptocurrencies, Evercoin is really, in my opinion, the way to go. And they have Zcash, of course. Pretty much everything on my top 5, except for Ripple's on there. I don't like Ripple, but just as a money, like NEM is kind of that would be more as like a money making play if you were to do that, because I know I mention it sometimes, but that's the only reason why. Because it's just different enough, and it's just like it has just these amount of features that I think make people think that it's something special, but. Whatever. Anyway, so my big picks, as far as like my top 5 cryptos, that being Bitcoin itself, Litecoin, Zencash, Zcash, and I guess maybe I'd say like Monero or Digibyte's on there, which that's an interesting play as well. It's got a good selection of where I would put my money, just because it doesn't have fucking everything, or it doesn't have any like Digibyte's kind of. Well, it's not exactly Tangle based, but it's got stuff going on. So for very basic exchanging, I recommend this. As far as like getting involved in pump and dump schemes with like new, REC 20 tokens that come out and everything, of course, it's not useful for that. But then I think that that's bullshit to even really work with anyway. By and large, other than maybe, there was the Telegram ICO, but other than that. So, which even that, I didn't, personally, full disclosure to the executive producers of Sovereign Tech, I did not get involved in that ICO. In fact, Telegram's in kind of a bit of trouble. I'm not going to be able to get to it in the Sovereign Tech Prime episode this week, but the Russian government has told Telegram they need to hand over their information on Russian users, or they are going to ban the app's use within the geographic area of Russia. Of course, it's an open source project, and by the nature of the internet, as it were, it's impossible just to like ban an app. Like you really can't do that, it's gonna get circumvented, without even thinking twice, and without much trouble. But regardless, and also Telegram is a company that actually moves its headquarters like every 6 months, like they're constantly, on the go. So good luck even trying to, do anything to them anyway without creating some kind of international incident. Not to say that Russia is afraid of doing, a Russian government is afraid of doing that. Very important to use the term government when you're talking about countries, because, I have tons of Russian listeners. I'm sure I have tons of Russian patrons, and obviously you're great people. It's governments that suck. It's people that are great. And so, even though government's a fiction, and it's just people ruling over other people, right? But regardless, you get my point. So, but I don't see it as like any kind of death knell for Telegram, but I was just saying that they are in a bit of trouble, as much as trouble can be. So Evercoin, I definitely recommend that for doing a lot of your more basic stuff and kind of putting your, right now, I think where my personal opinion, especially with the, present dive in a lot of prices of cryptocurrencies, where you kind of want to get into a holding pattern, okay? And I think that there are interesting moves to be made by holding in more proven cryptocurrencies, like, say, Bitcoin, Zcash, Litecoin, things like this. And I if you have Zencash, I totally let it sit. I'm not an investor. I'm not giving investment advice. Yeah. But right now, like anything you'd want to do, I think Evercoin can do. So there you go. Again, they're not a sponsor, but I wouldn't mind. I'm very particular who I let be a sponsor, but I would have no problems with them being a sponsor. Okay, so let's move on to another question from that. But got a nice little tech question in there early. Let's see. If you think IQ, this is from Twitter, if you think IQ is largely invalid, then how do you yourself define intelligence? Ooh, okay. Great question. In fact, this was just posted today. Let's talk a little bit about this, okay? So IQ, intelligence quotient, is this concept based off of G, okay, the G quotient, right, which is this mathematical, it's its own mathematical equation. And so here, let me explain more. Okay. I think the G quotient itself is very questionable. Okay. No, you know what? I'm going to go back even further. Okay. But I am going to give you an answer to this, even though it might seem like at first somehow like I'm dodging or just being, I don't know what term I want to use. We have so little understanding of what consciousness is. Now, in fact, we talked about this. This is a few episodes ago when it was, just two amazing ladies, Ellen and Stephanie, and we were in the hotel. We were doing a hotel room show, and we talked about, kind of the problems of consciousness. Like, there's real problems with understanding it. So consciousness itself, which intelligence you would argue is a part of, I would hope people would argue for that, or I would assume, I guess I should say, but maybe that's a bad assumption to make. Because boy, some people say some really weird shit to me on Twitter. Whoa. But anyway, so consciousness we don't really have a grasp of. And if we don't have a grasp of the underlying framework that intelligence would arguably come out of, okay, even though it's debatable whether or not any psychologist actually says intelligence comes solely from the brain, you kind of have to like question like any concept of intelligence in the first place, right? Or any concept of like measuring intelligence, I should say. You can see intelligence in action, okay? You can see cleverness, right? Like you can see all these different attitudes and abilities of a sapient mind in action. And that's a way enough to prove that. Are tests the best way to prove that? No, and we'll talk about why in just a second. But let's talk about sapience. So sapience is the term I use to differentiate us, and obviously I'm not the only one that does this, to differentiate us from the animals. Now, what makes a human a human? What makes it a sapient species compared to just a simple animal species? Okay. What makes it different is that a sapient species can act outside of its biological functions. It can act outside of instinct. Okay. Does that mean that there may be other species on Earth besides humans that are sapient? Yes. In fact, I would argue that there are few. Dolphins among others. Okay. Because they seem to have this ability. And then there's other little very basic tests, okay, that you can go through to sort of test for this idea of sapience. But sapience and intelligence are kind of two different concepts. Okay. And really this is where the main problem is going to come in, is that IQ tests themselves. Okay. IQ is just one form of intelligence, even if I agreed with the concept. So IQ and IQ tests are themselves very problematic, because IQ tests have been regularly, like throughout history, and the IQ tests have been around for a little over 100 years. As we understand them, as modern test taking would understand them. Okay. There is, just a deluge of evidence to show that as either minorities or women would end up, or even geographic areas would end up testing higher, say, than men or people from Ivy League schools, or from, not necessarily like colleges, but like other schools, more uppity schools, whatever, higher class schools, I guess you could say, at the time. And certainly, America has had and maybe still has, very real class problems. That the tests would get changed. Like, they would literally add, say, more sports questions into IQ tests. What the fuck do sports questions have to do with an IQ test, right? And that would happen. So IQ tests themselves are biased, incredibly flawed, ideas. And so, but yes, does it seem like IQ tests are finding something? Maybe they're finding something. But there's the old saying that, well, if you got 100 on a test over and over again, what exactly does that prove? Does it prove that you're intelligent? No, it proves you're good at taking tests. Okay. I mean, tests themselves, like tests as we understand them, multiple choice or filling stuff in, reading comprehend, a lot of this other stuff, like most of that can really be chalked up to bullshit. And there have been plenty of people, including my good friend Brett Venat, who have done a lot of work to actually show a lot of this shit. Okay. Despite the fact that some people in the liberty movement seem to be almost pushing for, yeah, well, but these test scores say this, and these test scores say this, when, just a few years ago, just about anybody that slapped the word liberty, in front of their, I don't know, whatever they define themselves as, would laugh at the idea of anything being done in public schools mattering. But whatever. Okay. So anyway, here's the thing. IQ is not intelligence. Okay. It's just not. In fact, even, a lot of people talk about the Flynn effect, right? Which is saying that IQ test scores have been going up over the last 100 years. Maybe now they're going back down a little bit, but they were going up over 100 years. Flynn, in 2007, the guy who came up with the Flynn effect, even points out that the only thing that's changing with these IQ test scores going up is the ability to think hypothetically. Okay, it's the old adage of book smarts versus street smarts, right? Or life smarts. And just because somebody has book smarts doesn't mean that they have actual life smarts. Here's a great example to show that just because you say scored high on an IQ test, and thus supposedly you would have this ethereal thing known as high IQ, just to show that that's nonsense. Isaac Newton would probably, and I'm not the only one to say this, there's other scientists who would say, like many popular scientists who you would think that they would be pushing for IQ tests, right? Because, we got to get those standardized tests in school. They would even say that Isaac Newton would not score well on an IQ test. But who would argue that Newton wasn't brilliant? This is the thing. Newton was very wise. He could figure things out. He was clever. He didn't have a ton of like book knowledge. He didn't have a bunch of knowledge. Eventually later on in life he would, but to come up with the incredible concepts that he would end up laying out, or to write Principia and a bunch of other things, it was because he could figure things out. It's not because he had a bunch of shit that would look good on an IQ test in his head. Okay. So there's, I don't want to get into necessarily the multitude of intelligence theory. Okay. But how do I define intelligence? I define intelligence simply as sapience. Now, there's a stupidity and a smartness within that, and you can see that. Here's something. So there was an article, okay. I guess maybe this came out in 2012. If I can find it, I'll look for it. It was from Psychology Today. I think it was Darcia Narvaez. I think she wrote it. And she made this whole case. And in fact, it was really enlightening for me because, growing up, like I can just say, myself, I could just say, well, shit, and I read the bell curve, by Charles Murray and all that. And that book is very flattering to me because it says, well, Ashkenazi Jews are the smartest people on the planet. I have every reason to believe in this whole G quotient nonsense because it props me up, because I'm an Ashkenazic Jew. It's like, oh, okay, great. So I'm one of the smartest people on the planet. Fucking awesome. All right. I should just go forward and be all happy about it. But then, I remember reading this in 2012 and even stuff before then. Okay. Not that like IQ tests and shit like that was, the most important thing on my mind, but when I get to reading about this, maybe it was earlier than that, but anyway, whenever that article came out, and she's not the only person to have ever said it, but she came out to say how like all these different people were geniuses. Like a lot of murderers were considered geniuses. They would have high IQ scores, and all this stuff. But obviously when it comes to life and having things like, empathy and other, wisdom and kind of a social intelligence, they completely failed. But just because they have a high IQ, a lot of people, especially in the liberty movement, would argue that no, they should be allowed to breed and live on and because they're important members of society simply because they have this high number that nobody can really quantify very well anyway. That being the G quotient, that being doing well on an IQ test. And I mean that alone can show just how ridiculous that is. There are different types of, there's emotional intelligence. Like I said, there's social intelligence. There's a lot of these different things. In fact, one could even argue that having a really, what would be considered an intellect, like having a lot of book knowledge, actually narrows your understanding of how the world works or how things do work because you are running off of a lot of preset suppositions or, a lot of preset knowledge. Now, I mean, that can be helpful. I love having book knowledge. I like to think, I've said this so many times, my brain, I know some people would think it's my dick, but it's not. My brain is the most important thing to me because I have been working so hard on it and I've been trying to fill it with as much information as I can for my entire life. I will read books, as many books as I can till the day that I die and hopefully keep from getting Alzheimer's. Fortunately, my girlfriend was a doctor that was trying to cure, or was a PhD that was working on actually, and her research is still being used on how to cure Alzheimer's. But anyway, I'm going to read forever, but at the same time, I recognize that there are times where you have to put everything all of your preconceived notions, and put them in check, and you need to start going with imagination, and logic dictates that. Okay, not to sound like a Vulcan. But remember the old Sherlock Holmes line? No matter how improbable, when you end up with the final solution, it must be the truth. And that comes from imagination, not from book smarts, not from having a bunch of, shit inside your head. Okay, again, Isaac Newton didn't have a bunch of shit in his head. He was just very clever. He knew how to figure stuff out. That's important. That's the kind of person you want. You don't need somebody that can, tell you what a white hole is, okay, as compared to a black hole. You need someone who can actually grasp the concepts themselves, and IQ tests don't really test for that. Okay, so how do I define intelligence? Well, I define sapience as the ability to act outside of your biological instincts, okay, which pretty much every human, best that. Intelligence, otherwise, well, that's a lot of factors, and it's not something that could be tested in a classroom. It's just not possible. Not really. Except for maybe the one time I've ever heard of it being done in a classroom was this back in the 90s, right? This is a very popular story in the news at the time where a little girl, I think maybe in like 5th grade or something like that, she was diagnosed with cancer. She had to go through, all the various treatments, started losing her hair. And when she was coming back to school after, it appeared the treatments worked, every kid in the classroom shaved their head. Guess what? Those are a lot of intelligent kids. Well, I mean, maybe they kind of followed a little bit of a herd, but somebody there had a really intelligent idea. Okay, because it came out as empathy. Because it's not all like intelligence. Even my favorite, and I say this quote all the time because it's so key. It's so short and brilliant. And it's from Nathaniel Branden. Okay, yes, that Nathaniel Branden. In order to think clearly, we have to feel deeply. IQ has nothing to do with feelings. In fact, if you read the bell curve and other things, like they just want to erase the entire notion of emotions and all this different stuff. But I think that that's an accurate statement. But here's the thing. Here's the rub. You have to feel those emotions to have clarity of thought, to even be able to express what could possibly be intelligence. So no, intelligence can't just be IQ, because your emotional state, your capacity for empathy, your imagination, which imagination has zero to do with, like it really does. It has pretty much zero to do with intelligence, because imagination, one could define as just, conjuring shit out of nowhere. What could intelligence have to do with that? So I don't know that I could come up with my own definition necessarily of intelligence, because like I said at the beginning of all this, we barely understand consciousness. So how exactly can we kind of lay this out? I can define what sapience is, but what intelligence is, well, intelligence for me, to my mind, is a multitude of things. It's a lot of different types of intelligence, but it's also, in conjunction with empathy, with your emotions, with your anger, with your imagination. It's all of these things that put together, and you can't put that on a test, and I don't think that you can quantify it, nor are you going to be able to find out who holds all of those keys and who knows how to use them, like their imagination. Some people, look, if the internet wasn't here, this will lead into another question, actually. If the internet wasn't here, I wouldn't be able to express myself with a lot. Like, you'd never know all the ideas and the stories and everything that I want to write, and the stories I want to tell, and all of the audio productions I love doing and everything. You'd never know. But because I could never show that off, well, I guess I need to go off to the concentration camps for the white boys, or for the Western civilization lovers. So that's, I guess that's how I would define it. But it's just a lot of these different elements that come together. And can you test for it? You can see it. I don't know how well you can necessarily test for it. Maybe if, you're doing kind of a rat in the cage kind of situation, maybe you could see, who's clever, who's not. But a rat is in the human being in some kind of cage, which obviously I think is unethical. But there you go. Okay. So I know that's kind of a roundabout answer, but I don't know that there's a good answer right now. There's, I am, what is it, the Heart Math Institute? I am open to these ideas that your heart has, neural pathways, like very, very interesting and unique neurons that, is there thought going on there? What does that have to do with intelligence? And how much and that's another part of it too. How much does health, play a part into intelligence? Like, can a person that, I don't know, health is an important part of it too. So that's another factor that I didn't put in, these are things that we're figuring out. And the problem is that IQ tests have historically been used to quantify people and to justify terrible treatment of people or classification of people, which stop trying to classify human beings. Yes, there are smart people, there are dumb people. Sure, you can see that. When I don't know how many Darwin Awards or whatever you've got to read, about that are legit that show that some people just don't have this shit figured out. Okay, but what makes them stupid? What makes the other person smart? Well, that's shit we're still figuring out. But it's one of those things, when you see it. The individual really is ineffable. I don't know that I don't think we don't have words for it, and I think that there may be aspects of what being an individual is that we'll never completely understand. So how can we exactly, say what intelligence is? I find that to be a very specious, concept in itself. Again, sapience, that's easy. That's really easy. But intelligence outside of that, but it doesn't matter. Like, if a person's dumb, they're still welcome to the same human liberties that the rest of the species gets to enjoy, right? And that's the thing, is that IQ tests have generally been used to take away those human liberties. And that's a problem. So, anyway, Let's move on to another question. I love that question. Thank you for asking. But yeah, so IQ might not be exactly bullshit, but it might as well be, because the concept, especially since the way it's been used historically, is oppressive at best, by varying authorities, not just governments, like social authorities too. And you always have to watch out for social authoritarianism as much as you do legislative or military or otherwise. So, all right, let's shake this up a bit. True fact. Brian Sovereign died years ago and replaced him with a more enthusiastic guy by the crypto cabal. Go listen to his earlier episodes. The real Sovereign was much more mild-mannered. Prove me wrong. I love it. Yeah. I was just finding my footing, a more enthusiastic guy. No, it's very true. I've said this to people. I tell them all the time, like, please do not go listen to the early episodes of Sovereign Deck. Not that they're bad. I've listened to them here and there, and I think they're still very informative, and there's a lot of fun times being had on there. And I still called myself the Golden Stallion, even though I'd say it in a much more mild-mannered way. I was just finding my footing, And at the time, so here's the thing. At the time, I was very much into like nonviolent communication and some other ideas. And we've talked about this, believe it or not, where we've actually talked about some of this stuff was on some of the wrestling specials, which I don't think were too popular. So Stephanie and I, we watch wrestling like, every week. But we haven't talked about it. We haven't done episodes on it because they didn't seem to be too popular. So whatever. But if you listen to like the wrestling episodes that we've done, and I think we did 2 where we reviewed, we didn't review the Royal Rumble. We reviewed Clash of Champions. Maybe that's the only one we did. Anyway, on that, we talked a little bit about where the change happened with my style, shall we say, on the show. But even then, kind of the bombast was a part of it. Like you can hear the early ads and everything where I definitely made it all sound very badass. But there are people, there's people who are still dear friends. In fact, one gal in particular I can think of, like she stopped listening to the show once I started going a little too nuts because she likes the much calmer me. I mean, look, I don't want to say, because this is the real me. Okay. The me alone at home. How about that? The me alone at home. Not that I'm usually not alone. There's usually, one or two people or, wonderful people around me, but, me alone at home, I'm just like, for lack of a better example, I don't like to use a religious example, but I'm just like this, like monk, like a scribe almost, just like hunched over a book or something. I'm so quiet and just, I'm not always so quiet. Like if I'm really alone for a long period of time, I start making all these weird, like, I start making noises like animal or something. But yeah, normally like I'm just reading, or maybe, ingesting some kind of, movie or like a classic sci-fi show or something, or maybe, playing 3DS, but you wouldn't even know I was there unless when I'm working out, then, the metal gets turned up to 15 and, then you definitely know I'm around because I'm grunting and everything. When I work out, I mean, and usually I'm not alone. Whoever's working out, with me or with us, it's got to sound like there's a fucking orgy going on, but I think that's when you're doing it right. That's why I can't go to like Planet Fitness, because fuck it, like they don't let you make any noise. Anyway, okay. So let's, I just got an email from $1 Scan. What the fuck? Is that great news for you? As a Platinum member, we have integrated our service with Box, Google Drive, and Dropbox. You can now store your books in the cloud and read them online. Shit, I just pulled the mic. Sorry. Just slap my knee, Polish knee slapper right there. Anyway, wait, that'd be, I slap my elbow. That's double Polish on me. There goes that intelligence theory. They never work with OneDrive. What the fuck? I'm gonna try and get in touch with Microsoft customer service. This is gonna be fun. Maybe I can't record it. But I'd love to. I want to ask them, it's like, will you open up your fucking APIs, or does just nobody use OneDrive? I mean, I have a hard time believing that, but okay, whatever. Oh, God damn it. Because I'm not going to use Google Drive and Dropbox. Fuck you, Nancy, Condoleezza Rice. Okay, well, anyway, let's get back onto the questions here. Let's see. Here's kind of a comment. So, actually, this was Robin of Sovereign Tech co-host Robin, the man. He found out, like, he was posting on. He interacts on Patreon, of course. He co-hosts the Patreon only Star Wars update with me, so it makes sense. And he was noticing that his comments would get deleted, like automatically, when he would comment on something on the Sovereign Tech Patreon. And he would be using a VPN while doing it. And interestingly, like, he actually got in touch with customer service, and I tried to get to the bottom of this as well. He had much better luck than I. And he found out that, yes, if you're running a VPN, that Patreon will treat your comment as spam, even if, and Robin's a paying patron, and that's crazy. Like, if that's the whole point, or one of the benefits, I think, of one of the few reasons I'd ever argue for a paywall, like when Steam implemented, like the $5 rule for you being able to use chat and all this other stuff, is that, when you create a paywall, that does eliminate spam. But then when you're behind the paywall, why treat it as spam? Very ugly business on Patreon's part. They said they cleared it up, but it looked like they were doing it IP address by IP address, or not IP address, but whatever the metric was, I forget exactly. But very odd. If you see that happening to you, you can get in touch with customer service. I'm on like this board where all these different Patreon creators at a certain level are allowed on, and I made another post on there recently saying, hey, if people are paying patrons, what the fuck? Like, you can't be registering them as spam. And also, some of the biggest creators on Patreon are like privacy advocates, like Threatwire, some of these others. And we're telling people, myself included, to use VPNs all the fucking time. Like, this is unacceptable, so I'll find out if anything like that changes. But if you happen to see that your comments just automatically delete, I'm not doing that. Patreon's doing it. I think it's kind of weird that they have a spam bot for that anyway. But anyway, yeah, someday the alternative to Patreon will come. And what they need to do is, it needs to have cryptocurrencies. It's very simple what they need to do, and I will walk away from Patreon. It's got to, accept cryptocurrencies, and it has to be able to do the automatic or the custom RSS feeds for podcasts, to where those RSS feeds can be cut off at the end of like a paywall problem, or worse, when somebody stops subscribing. Do that. I am on your side. I will promote the shit out of your website. You'll get so much free promotion to me. From me. You will not have to be, I guarantee you will not have to be a sponsor. You're going to have over 10,000 people hearing about you every single week, because I'm going to keep mentioning it. But, someone's got to create that, and no one has. So, all right, let's see. Here's an interesting one. I was stunned the other day on a Prime episode when you said that it would be good if people stopped listening to podcasts. But then I thought they'd never listen to you. How do you square this away? It's almost as if you're saying to eschew technology altogether today. There's more, but I think that gets the gist. No, I'm not saying that at all. Look, if you listen to Sovereign Tech for a while, in fact, this is something I've mentioned this in the past because I thought it was just the most amazing thing. I'm going to give Alex Jones a little bit of credit. Alex Jones gave a speech at some college. I can't imagine. I don't know if it was like, One Eye Under the Illuminati college or what, but anyway, I'm kidding. But I mean, really, he was giving a speech at a college. And he actually said, and I thought this was just I gave him at that time, and this was years ago. This is like probably 7 or 8 years ago, but I gave him a ton of credit for this. He said, look, after you listen to me long enough, you're going to get it. You're going to have you're going to have the eyes to see how all this stuff's really working. You don't need to listen to me anymore. And when he said you won't need to listen to me anymore, I thought, not that was humble, but just that was like, yes, like I don't even know what term to use for that. Like, that was just so spot on. And look, that's okay. If you get to a point where you feel your shit's secure and you're doing great and you've set your life free. You've got, I don't know, you're in some kind of wild polyamorous relationship or something, and you're having a great time and you're feeling very self-reliant and all this different stuff. And, you've come to, take on individualism and, like you've got the galactic mindset where you're thinking about, like how does this affect like everything on a universal scale, not just on some, petty any local, earth scale or something. Like, if you start putting all that stuff together, no, why would you listen to me? I mean, other than for the entertainment, but that's why I try to make it entertaining and it's not just a factual show or some kind of bullshit interview show, for the entertainment, I think that's what keeps people around, whether they realize it consciously or, consciously or unconsciously, they recognize it. So no, I'm not, it's fine. If people could get over that, look, I don't listen to that many podcasts anymore. And part of that reason is because what ends up happening, like, so this was also 7 or 8 years ago, okay, before I moved to New Hampshire, like I listened to Free Talk Live, and I'm still, to this day, I am so honored that I was able to contribute to a show that really did do a lot for me back then, okay? Free Talk Live was family. I was living in New York. I didn't know any of these people. I didn't talk to Mark or Ian or any of these people, okay? But they were there. They got it. They were where my head was at, say, at that time. Okay, because, even Free Talk Live will admit they're more of the elementary school of liberty. They were where I was at that time, and they were speaking my language, and, like, to be able to hear them 3 hours a day, every day, was so helpful because my actual family that was around me, physically, was, didn't get shit and were abusive and just, terrible. Well, I'll just say it. They're terrible people. And I got myself in that situation. I understand, but of course I also got my fucking self out of it. But, it was so powerful to have that. And so I think with a lot of podcasts, yeah, it's great to be informed and all that. And I think a lot of people just listen to podcasts because, around the office, maybe it's the popular thing to do. Like, oh, everybody's listening to, I don't know, this stupid crime podcast this week, and they are stupid. But regardless, so yeah, people want to feel like this sense of connection and everything, but that's it. I mean, like if you're feeling that connection in your own life, you don't need to listen to podcasts. You don't even need to watch TV. You don't need to do any of that shit. If you've got all these beautiful relationships in your life, you have friends near you, you've got your own little community around you, whatever, 5, 10, 15 people or something, or you're going out and having fun, or you're just talking. I mean, I can't picture a time where a person wouldn't read books, but yeah, you don't need podcasts anymore. You don't need me. So, that I'm not saying that, I'm not telling people don't listen to it, but I'm just saying if you don't feel the need to anymore, well, then you probably got a lot of good shit going on for you. Now, if you're not listening to it because you're so livid at something that I said, well, I mean, that's a whole other problem, but you get my point. What got me into technology, and the reason, in fact, is the person kind of wrote on a bit and even said, it's like, how are you not running off to a cave? Well, look, what got me into technology, I mean, for the first thing that got me into tech growing up, and I mean at a really young age, single digits, was because I wanted to write so badly, because I love to read. And when you're this voracious of a reader, eventually I think a person wants to get to the point where they want to write their own shit. And so I wanted to write, and the computer screen was unlimited paper. So there's that. But then the most amazing thing happened when, suddenly the internet got connected. Okay, like really got connected, and I don't mean like AOL or Prodigy, even though I did use Prodigy quite a bit. I mean, when the wild west of the internet, and like when I could get on IRC, right, and all that. And I remember to like chatting in the Stargate SG-1 rooms and everything. Like I found at that time, that was a different family situation than the one I was just describing, but no less oppressive or problem, or, with plenty of problems that I needed to escape from. But I found my real family. People that really got it, and it was beautiful at the time because you had to have, speaking of intelligence, or at least you had to know how to be able to get into like an IRC chat room at the time. And it wasn't exactly as easy as it is today. Some would argue that it's not even easy today. But so there was you had a baseline way that you could, or a baseline connection with these people because they knew how to get here. And so did you, because they're in the chat room. Aha. there is some level of intellect, of intelligence there. Okay, there's a test that you can see. And so you had an immediate rapport with these people just because they were in the chat room alone. And then, you could kind of build on from, things from there, and you could go into very specific chat rooms, and, you would type in anything. You would type in, #, Stargate SG-1. And then suddenly you find, holy shit, there's a Stargate SG-1 room and there's like 30 people in here. This is fucking awesome. And so that's what got me into it, was the ability to find my actual family. The thing is that eventually you fall away from it. Like I met, when I was a teenager, speaking of polyamorous relationships at that time, okay, I met, like my first real girlfriend and some other people in the Stargate SG-1 IRC chat room. And it wasn't like an official SG-1 chat room. It's just something that a bunch of people set up that they would talk about on Friday nights after the show on Showtime. And, and I'd meet other people, and I met all these friends. And eventually, you get to start hanging out with these people in real life, either because you get to fly around and hang out with them, or they come to you or whatever, and you don't need to go to the IRC chat room anymore, right? But I'll always be thankful to the technology, and I'm not going to throw it away, that gave me those connections in the first place. But the technologically enabled connections, be it a podcast or an IRC chat room, are not the end game. They're the beginning. Kind of reminds me of the old Spock saying, right? Logic is the beginning of wisdom, not the end. There's something for your, for IQ. Against IQ, I guess. So, I mean, that's it. I was this little Hebrew boy in New York. Ladies love the little Hebrew boy. But I got to find people that didn't give a shit about that, and that, some of them did, but, I got to find my real family, people that connected with me based upon interests and passions and other attractions. That's, that's the beautiful thing, but that's not the end game. The end game is to eventually actually get together, like this connecting with people and having these communities online. It's horseshit. It's horseshit. It's great. It's a stopgap or something, it's a bridge. But then you got to burn that bridge, man. I mean, you don't have to get rid of, that's not saying get rid of tech, but then, don't look back. Let it light your way home, baby. The flame from the burning of that bridge. So yeah, I'm not going to run off to a cave. I'm always going to be into tech, and there's plenty of tech out there that the government really can control. And this leads into our next story. Wow, I'm actually going to be able to get into all the questions that I lined up. This may be a first because we've done quite a few. And this is actually a story. Speaking of tech controlled by the government, or theoretically controlled by the government, this is a story. It's from surveillancevalley.com. I put the link in the show notes. This is from a patron. It's from February 27, 2018, and it's titled "Fact Checking the Tor Project's Government Ties." Now, there's a whole write-up here. There's a bunch of different FOIA release documents that are linked to it in it. I've looked at some of them, but the basic argument goes, and some of this I think people already believed, is that Tor and the Tor project are funded by the government. Okay. Now, yes, I've actually always known and have talked about it, and many other privacy advocates, and I don't know what we would get, crypto enthusiasts and whatever else, have been well aware that some percentage of money that the Tor project has gotten over the years has come from the U.S. Navy. Okay, we know that. That's a fact. No argument from anybody here. Now, the argument goes is that actually, according to this research done by this person, is that there are 3 organizations that are doing shy of 100%, and it can't be 100% because I know, me personally, I donate to the Tor project. Obviously, I'm not a government plant. Did you hear crickets? All right. So anyway, so no, it's not true. The statement that it's 100% funded by the government is provably false. Okay. But that the bulk of it is funded, say, by 3 spin-off CIA companies, one of them being the Broadcasting Board of Governors, the BBG. That's kind of the big one that this person points out. Is one of the funders? Sure. I think there's some accuracy to that statement. Once again, I'm going to say that while like the funding dollars that can be more easily tracked the evidence is pretty interesting that it is coming from government or quasi-government organizations. Yes, you can see that, but there's also a ton of funding coming from some, from individuals of means and individuals not of means, and from entire activist groups that are very legitimate around the world. So it's not 100% done by that. Now the documents also go. I have the documents. The documents also go into saying that the programmers for Tor, or at least it must be certain people at Tor, because I have friends who are programmers for Tor, people that I trust pretty hard, and that they're not getting their orders from on high. They're not getting their orders from some government agency. Okay, they're just developing it, and again, it's an open source project, and they're doing everything that they can do to batten the hatches on it and all of that. And we're going to talk about that more in a second. But they're claiming that nodes, Tor nodes that are the backbone of Tor, there are a lot of Tor nodes that are listed as independent or seen as independent by the community that were ordered, put in place by some aspect of the U.S. government, and that various developers and people at the Tor project are aware of this, and they know it, and they're taking their orders from people upstairs. Okay. So that's the basic gist of this. I put the link in the show notes if you want to read some of it yourself. But there's points I think that can be brought up. And then the person says, oh, when I brought all this up, I had privacy advocates and hackers and all these people shouting me down. They were attacking me, blah, blah, blah. I would not attack this person for anything. I think I appreciate this kind of level of research and real journalism, frankly, that they did. However, their conclusions are making a lot of suppositions. Like I said, first off, it seemed to be completely ignoring how much the Tor project is funded by donations itself. Because that is a substantial amount of money that gets put into there. And you can look at some of the names. They're not, some of the people that are open about it. Those are not government officials. Okay. Regardless. So you have that. Okay. And then there's the fact that, in fact, he points, the person that wrote this up points this out. Like he's going to it's Yasha Levine. There's certain, in fact, Yasha Levine, I think that's the same person that did that kind of expose on Google's ads, why they can't be double blind, but I could be wrong about that. But that name's awfully familiar. Anyway, so claim number one that he fact checks himself apparently is Tor does not provide backdoors to the government. And his rating of claim number one is that's moderately true. That no, what he says, according to his FOIA documents, what it claims is that no, nobody is giving backdoors to the U.S. government. However, what is happening is that if there is some kind of technical flaw with Tor, the Tor project or certain people, certain members of the Tor project are letting the government know first that there's a problem before they're letting, the broader community know about it. Okay. So, but here's the thing is that, nobody's handing over backdoors to Tor to the government. So Tor is still relatively secure. Now, as far as like the nodes, here's the other part. Like the bulk of the nodes that are out there, as we understand it, are actually run by independent individuals, various rebel groups, honestly, activists, hobbyists. All kinds, the Tor project would not be the Tor network would not be what it is and would not be usable as it is if it was just a government project. And I want to give you an analogy here. Not that proof by analogy is proof, but I think it's a great example. Maybe analogy isn't even the right word because I think this is, downright fact. Some people, and in fact, back when I was on Free Talk Live, I had people who would call in and say, oh, the internet is a government program. Like the government knew exactly what they were doing, blah, 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 blah. Okay. The government does not have the manpower to run what we know of as the internet. Okay. They may have some technical abilities to shut it down. Okay. What is that? Order 363 or whatever. They may have certain tools and collection of 0 days that allows them to exploit what the internet is, but the internet would not be what it is without private individuals and private industry. Yes, the government did create the internet, but they're not the ones that turned it into it was individual actions and private actions that turned it into, the monstrosity, honestly, that I'm not even saying it's a good thing, but to what it is today. So, and I think Tor is the exact same way. Sure. Like, no one would argue that the government had their hand in Tor. And it's not tough to believe, at least for me, that they still do. But at the same time, just like the internet, that doesn't mean that private individuals aren't using the Tor network for their own means and for genuinely anti-government means. Now, the claim goes on from Yasha here that, well, but it's always been a government tool, which is very similar to the rhetoric I've heard from people about the internet, like that it was always meant to be surveillance and blah, blah, blah. And no, I don't think so. I mean, it was meant to be, it's like ARPANET. It was meant to be a network that could survive a nuclear blast, but I don't think it was always meant to be something that where they could spy upon everybody. That was something they later figured out that they could do based upon the kind of industries and businesses that private companies and individuals set up on it. So with Tor, yes, and here's the thing. So why it's believable for me to think that the government is funding it is because, yes, absolutely the government uses it. Of course they do. Yes, the CIA uses it. They use it to, engage in foreign policy, to get past various technologies from, the Turkish government or the Chinese government or whatever, whatever government that they want to fuck with, or that they want to create a coup within a certain country. They use the Tor network to enable that coup, a CIA controlled coup, which those things absolutely happen. That's not an Alex Jones thing to say. It's a fact. So sure, they use it. But just because they use it doesn't mean that, because of the openness of the technology and the scalability and the, kind of the more homebrew ability and nature of it, okay, everybody can use it, just like the internet. And if this person, wants, I mean, I get the argument, but, and yes, I want to evolve past that. That's why I love, and look, I'm not saying this because they're a sponsor, but seriously, I love the idea of Zencash and the secure nodes, because then this is creating, that alternative infrastructure, much like Tor is, and this one may not be government funded, or will not be. I mean, you can't say who's buying the crypto, or who's actually buying Zencashes and the tokens themselves, but regardless. This is the right way to do things. And really it gets down to the point, you want your pipes to be dumb. It doesn't, like with the Tor network, to me, what matters is, does it function? Does it do what it says? And is it, is it largely like dumb pipes, just encrypted dumb pipes, or, more anonymously set up dumb pipes? Yes. Does the government use it? Yes. Just like, does the government use Bitcoin? Abso-fucking-lutely. You better believe the government is using Bitcoin right and left, like the CIA, the NSA, and all them. They're using Bitcoin. They're funding half of their foreign policy probably with it, because it's such a beautiful way to send money. Or they could be using, I don't know, they could be using any of these. They could be using Monero. They could be using whatever. Of course they are. Yes, they're largely dumb, but there's some aspects of them that are pretty intelligent. And of course they're going to use this, just like they had the intelligence to use Tor, okay, to, for communications and to get past government firewalls and all this other stuff. Sure they do. But and one could argue that if they're actually buying into cryptocurrencies, that they are funding these cryptocurrencies in a very real sense through speculation. Maybe they're even paying off through some kind of, offshore company or offshoot company from the CIA or something. Maybe they are paying, the developers for Monero, or who knows what. I don't know. Hell, who really, just pick your coin. I don't mean to pick on Monero. Okay. Sure, they're doing that. I don't think that's unbelievable at all. But then does that mean that what? I mean, what? We stop using it? No, because the technology still fucking works. We'll use it too. I mean, the argument is almost like, if it really feels like the argument is, well, the government made spoons, and so we're going to have soup with forks. That's preposterous. I mean, it's just preposterous. So I get it. There might be a lot of truth to what this guy is saying, and I'm not shouting him down, and I respect the hell out of his work. But even he's kind of proving the point that no, they're not being handed over back doors. Yes, the people at the Tor Project are largely, freedom oriented, and blah blah blah. And yeah, this tech works for what it is, etc. Okay, then it's just the tool, and we're going to use it. So that's my. There was a guy, this is at PorkFest last year. There was a guy who I kind of like. And he said to me that, I saw that, kind of the same exact argument. In fact, even in this article, the guy brings up Signal, but kind of the same argument where he says, yeah, there's this Navy, offshoot company that was funding Open Whisper systems. So Signal's a government program. What? What doesn't the government fund? Like these kinds of arguments. Look, if you don't trust Signal, don't trust Signal. Okay, fine. You don't have to. Use PGP, though I'm sure then somebody's going to say, well, but Phil Zimmerman took $1,000 check from the NSA back in 1991. Oh, okay. Well, look at the open source code, learn for your fucking self, and you want to make those kind of bold claims, you check out the code, okay? Or you get people that you trust to check out the code, which is exactly what has happened, all right, over these many decades and years and whatever. And if it looks good, then you go on. That's why it's called open source. That's the importance of open source. If this shit wasn't open source, I would certainly feel a lot differently about this sort of thing. Okay, but this guy's like, well, don't use Signal because it's a planner. It's whatever. That's crazy. Sure, the government uses Signal too. Why? Because it works. Why did the Hillary Clinton campaign use Signal? Because it fucking worked. This isn't hard to figure out. And did they somehow donate or fund to make sure that they could keep it alive so that they didn't have to have email servers, getting cracked into by who knows what or used against them? Yeah, fuck yes, they did. They're human beings. So I know the person that sent this in was asking just for my opinion on it, and I'm not yelling at them. I'm just saying that, I get this line of thought. I really do. I really, really do. But there is a saying that's as old as the first episode of Sovereign Tech. There's a saying, follow the money. Yeah, there's something to that. But really what you want to follow is the attitude. You got to follow the attitude. And let me tell you, the attitude of the people at the Tor Project is about as spot on as you could hope for with a project of this type. I'm not going to say it's perfect. I think some of these people believe in political action and all that other shit, but what am I going to do about that? Okay. How about Signal? Well, Moxie Marlin Spike's an anarchist. Good. And in fact, you've even had very popular, like Ian Thompson, I love that guy, at the Register, who, this is a tech journalist, a very popular tech journalist. And he came out and said, I'm glad that there are tech companies, and there are tech products and services run by anarchists because they don't want any government hands in it. Or like as far as control. I mean, funding, well, that's a tough thing for anybody to be able to keep track of, especially when it's, organizations like that. But people get it. They understand the importance, even people, and look, Ian Thompson's not an anarchist. He votes, he does the whole thing. But he gets the importance of having people with that attitude. He understands the importance of that attitude in a company. Okay? So that's the thing. You want to follow the money with the Tor Project, fine. You want to follow the money with a lot of these different projects, sure, whatever. I've heard people make claims about, in fact, I've debunked these, and they're absolutely outlandish. That somehow the Bilderberg Group is funding, I don't know, Blockstream or whatever. Give me a goddamn break. You have no idea what you're talking about. I get it. I talked about it on a Q&A. I covered it, and I explained exactly why that's just not so. But, people. Yeah, get that phrase, follow the money. It can be useful, but you got to keep it in check with following the attitude first. Okay? Keep that in check. So, all right, that's all my thoughts on that. I hope I explained that. I'm glad that you asked about it. maybe I should have done it for a Sovereign Tech Prime episode, but I'm not sure when I was going to be able to get to it. Maybe I'll take actually this audio out and put it into a Sovereign Tech Prime episode so people can see what they're missing on a Q&A or something. But thank you for sending that in. There was a lot of it was a really interesting read. And again, I appreciate the work that this person did. But at the same time, like these conclusions, that follow the money shit is getting awfully tiresome, because again, what doesn't the government fund? En masse, there's practically nothing. So, whether it's the U.S. government, the Chinese government, the Russian government, or whoever, it's almost like, it would seem to be if you're, if you're plotting it on a map, everything would be red, or whatever color you wanted to choose. Like it would just be covered. So anyway, okay. Last bit here, your album of the week. How about that? Let's give you an album of the week. And this is, I'm sure you're just waiting for me to mention this because this just came out a couple weeks ago. Holy shit. Judas Priest came out with a new album beginning of March. Firepower, it's called. It is fucking heavy. It is awesome. It is at points cheesy when it needs to be. This is great shit, especially after, sadly, what's been going on with Glenn Tipton. Of course, I feel terrible, for him to develop that condition. But that's none of this is stopping Judas Priest, from doing what they do. And you just listen to Firepower and it. I hope I get to see them in concert. I hope I get to see, Rob Halford at least. I mean, at this rate, he's probably going to be the only guy left, from the original lineup. But I would love to see him in concert again. I mean, man, this album, it just kicks ass. It's track for track. I'm not even going to point out like what the best track is because every single song on it's just solid gold, and I expect nothing less from Judas Priest. I've enjoyed their most recent outings, like Angel Retribution. Granted, I think that came out maybe like 15 years ago now. That's one of the best albums they've ever done. I put Angel Retribution right up there with like British Steel. I mean, fantastic. And even like I like their concept album of Nostradamus, that was cool. So anyway, yeah, check out the new Judas Priest album. It's just fabulous and really, really heavy. Great stuff to work out to. Okay, that's it. I'm wrapping this up. Went a little long with this one, but we had a lot to cover, and I'm glad we got in so many questions this week. Got to get in a question about H.P. Lovecraft, hopefully next week. And of course, I got a lot of great content coming out on Patreon throughout the following week. Woo! That's enough for now, though, baby. I will see you on the other side.